Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a delight to be here. So I'd like to really engage with one key question today, which is how do we foster vibrant, creative urban ecosystems? And across the 2 days, we've heard a lot and talked a lot about creativity in tech and business practice. And I'd like to just shift the emphasis just slightly in my talk to focus on creativity in the ways in which we can help places to flourish in both the short and the long term. We talk a lot in a place-based context about how we redistribute resource, about growth, and about innovation. But what I want to put onto this agenda in a way that perhaps it hasn't been until recently is that place-based work isn't just geographic and economic, but it's lived and felt by all of us. And perhaps because it's felt by all of us, we take these dimensions for granted. And traditionally, therefore, they haven't been prioritised in some of the place-based work and policies and practices that we've initiated. So I suggest in this talk that we need to be more creative in how we think, crucially feel, and therefore do differently in the context of place-based work. To think about processes as well as outputs, and to consider how best we can nurture those everyday lived and felt experiences within the process of creating and sustaining and nurturing places that we would all like to live, work, and play in. So what I'm going to do with you today is share just some of the work of the Arts Humanities Research Council's Place programme, and in particular convey one key point that I hope you might get behind as a kind of call to action, which is to advocate really for the importance of each of us supporting a people-centred approach to place-based work. So as I go on and talk about what this programme does and about some of the key findings, I want to say at the outset that for me, place isn't just a space, it's more than a geographic location. And the evidence suggests that each of us need relationships with place as much as we need relationships with people. They're therefore not just the backdrops to our lives. So place-based work isn't just about where we work, but it's how we also work within place to be cognizant of these meanings and importance of lived and felt experiences. And so the people-centred aspect to this is key to working within place, that we need to work in much more equitable ways that isn't just about adding more voices into the debates and the decisions, which is important as it is. It's also about going beyond this to really understand the multiple meanings of place that we each hold as a result of our everyday lived and felt experiences. So in the AHRC Place programme, which runs until 2027, we work in partnership across universities, within communities and across industry to develop the potential of people-centred place-based approaches. We co-research, co-test, co-prototype and co-diagnose in ways that can help support organisational change to develop different kinds of people-centred policies and practices. It doesn't sit outside of economic growth, but instead it supports long-term inclusive growth for people and communities. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see the 5 key pillars of the programme, and also showing you this for ways that you might want to engage with us in the future. So the starting point really of our programme was to say, what is the added value that the arts and humanities can add in this place space? What can we give? And so we decided, having looked at all of the work that AH had funded and lots of the work that you've been talking about over the last 2 days, that the most important component of this is that we understand how to access the meanings in place, that we understand those lived and felt experiences, and we are able to use creative approaches that are equitable in the way we access, understand, and deliver policies and practices in partnership. And so we say that this approach, there's another acronym coming up today, MAP, meaning, creative approaches, and processes, are central really to rethinking how we can deliver place-based work. And so in the remainder of the talk, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into this framework, this MAP framework, to show how we can secure people-centred place-based work that delivers positive socio-economic outcomes for different people in different places across the UK and internationally. And to do that, I'd like to share 3 messages or key messages from our forthcoming report. So one of the key things we do in the programme is we work in partnership to research what's out there, but also to think about how we can take that research forward in terms of knowledge exchange and impact. And so one of the main ways we convey that back out into the community is through reports. And today, kind of soft launching the report on the right-hand side called Advancing People-Centred Approaches to Place. And the first key message that I'd like to share with you that's inside this report, so spoiler, you don't have to go and read it, it's 50 pages, but you can just listen to the 3 key messages, is that we're not working with space, we're working with place. And so it builds out that framework about what meaning is, to suggest that it's only through feelings and experiences that we can generate meanings that turn or transform geographic locations into meaningful places. Surely that's at the heart of what we should be doing when we're thinking about inclusive growth around the regions and nations of the UK and beyond. And so to do this, we're thinking about a very deliberate use of the term felt experience. We've used a lot, I've heard a lot over the last couple of days, lived experience, but this really shines the light not just on what we do in place, but how that makes us feel and how that affects the kinds of decisions that we're able to make if we have choice in particular places. So it encompasses things like pride, joy, and hope, as well as concepts like trust, belonging, attachment. But we don't just focus on the positive and the smiley and the optimistic sides of place. We're also really interested in things like fear, anger, sadness, loneliness, unbelonging, detachment, and disaffection. And we're interested in the complex messiness of how all of these things come together to shape different kinds of understandings about place and how we can use that to deliver perhaps more people-centred approaches to place. And this isn't just a theoretical concept that we've, in the Arts Humanities, dreamt up through our desk-based research. It's actually something that's gaining increasing traction within the policy and practice world. Now, you might not believe me. I think I'm probably speaking to an audience of the converted here or nearly converted. But when I used to stand up and talk about this kind of work, I'd almost get heckled in a very polite way, because we didn't really want to validate lived and felt and experiences and our emotional responses to place. We were more focused on the hardware, not the software. And so what we've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 years is an increasing shift in rhetoric, at least, to recognise that we can do things differently. We can think, we can feel, and we therefore can deliver things in a different way. There's lots of rhetoric in here about how feelings need to be taken into account. We need to put our experiences at the centre. And so in doing so, we're kind of evolving a traditional mindset, and hopefully we're all part of that journey. And this isn't a romantic abstraction that says it's a nice thing to do. It's essentially a must-have. Because on this next slide, you can see just some of the kind of positive socio-economic outcomes that we can achieve when we centre an understanding of our lived and felt experiences. So what you can see on the board here on the slide is a range of different outcomes that have been evidenced both in policy, practice, and in theory and concept to be able to deliver for people, for place, and for the economy. So we know that this can work in practice, not just to deliver economic growth, but to deliver a better quality of life within those places that we put resource into. And the final key message that I'd like to share with you is that we can also catalyse creative approaches to place. We can do differently and feel confident in the evidence base that we have to think about what's next. And what's next, I suggest, is in each of your everyday practices that I've heard about over the last couple of days. They sit squarely within the arts and humanities, but they'll also take collaboration across disciplines and across sector. So we can start by embedding a principle of designing for belonging and attachment, not as an add-on or something that might come further down the line, but in thinking about clusters or new housing or new towns, how do we start from the principle where we create places where people feel they can belong, feel they can be creative, and feel like they can be attached to each other within particular places? We can see social and cultural infrastructure as more than that, as holding emotional resonances for the different people that live, work, and play in those areas. It's not just an output. A library isn't just an output, but it's also a process through which we start to draw connections to people and place and to start thinking about the importance of valuing that as an emotional infrastructure along with its technical and physical infrastructure. And finally, as we've heard throughout the past 2 days, we need to nourish engagement with arts and culture, again, not just as an output, but also as a process. Because in the process of creating and making together in place, we start to solidify these kinds of positive felt experiences that lead, hopefully, to better trust and to more positive socioeconomic outcomes in the shorter and longer term. So we suggest that we can strengthen connection to people and place if we start to understand that we don't want to create space-based policies, but instead we want to deliver place-based. And to finish, I want to leave you with a call for action. We can be bolder, braver, and crucially more human in the way that we tackle some of the profound socioeconomic challenges that we're living through today. And what we finish with in the report is a call to action for all of you to think about the kinds of principles, processes, and outcomes that are possible when we start with meaning, when we start with our everyday lived and felt experiences, and start to deliver more people-centered, place-based approaches. Thank you for your time.